I'm making this audio recording to explain my medical reasons for not making a trip to Minnesota this year. I want to start out by saying first that I have not slept in a bed since April of 2009. I have actually been sleeping on a recliner since then, and the reason for that is because in April 2009 I had heart pauses, which I'll explain what they are in a minute, where they put a pacemaker in me. And what the problem has been is ever since they put that pacemaker in me, since 2009, whenever I sleep in the bed, lay flat or on my left or right side, I always get these two pains. Now the first pain will leave me disoriented, very uncomfortable, like I'm getting dizzy, neurotic, and the whole thing. And then about 30 seconds later, I'll get this second pain. And it seems like the second pain undoes what the first pain started. Otherwise, all of a sudden I start feeling better. I'm not dizzy. I'm not neurotic anymore. And so these days I actually look forward to that second pain. Now, what happens when I sleep in bed, I always get these pains, but when I sleep in a recliner, I don't get them as often. And don't ask me why. I know in recliner my body is elevated a little bit more, where in the bed you're sort of laying flat. But even though I have been sleeping in a recliner since 2009, I still get these pains. I've gotten them over a couple hundred times. It's just that compared to sleeping in the bed, if I were to would have been sleeping in the bed all this time, it would have probably been more like thousands of times. And so, in order to help you understand what I believe these pains are, which I don't really know for sure, but my guess is, I would have to explain my medical situation to you since then, and so help you understand what heart pauses are. So I wrote something early to do just that, and here we go. I'm going to read it right now. It says a heart pause is medically called a heart block. And a heart block with a pause of 6 seconds or longer is a third-degree heart block, which is exactly what I had, because my heart pauses lasted for more than 6 seconds, and so it was a third-degree heart block. Now it says the heart naturally has built-in pacemakers producing the heart rhythm or heart pace in which the heart beats. Electrical impulses are sent from the sinus, or when I say electrical impulses, I should say electrical impulses or signals are sent from the sinus node in the upper heart chambers to the ventricles in the lower heart chambers, causing the heart to contract, or what we call a heartbeat. But when those electric signals or impulses aren't getting through to the ventricles in the lower heart chambers, then the heart fails to contract, or just simply put, the heart fails to beat, what is known as a heart pause or heart block. However, the lower heart chambers have their own built-in pacemakers that will eventually cause the heart to beat by itself. But when that delay is more than 6 seconds, as it was in my case, it can cause a person to become dizzy or perhaps completely pass out because the heart isn't beating during those 6 seconds, or perhaps even longer, up to 15 seconds. Now I will explain to you what happened to me in 2009. So what the doctors say is that I was having heart pauses, okay, where my heart stopped beating for a few seconds, okay. Now, or delayed beating. I'd rather say delayed beating, because when that signal doesn't get through, the heart itself will eventually start beating on its own. But it's just that if there's more than a 6-second delay, then the heart isn't beating at 6 seconds, which was exactly what happened to me. But anyway, on April 4th, 2009, I got up out of the bed, like I do all the time, every day. And the first thing I did was go into the bathroom to urinate, which I which I always have to do every time I get up, and I'll bet you all of you have to do the same thing. That's normal for human beings to have to urinate when they first get out of bed every day. But when I'm standing over the commode trying to urinate, all of a sudden I found myself laying on the floor looking up at the ceiling and couldn't understand how I got down there. I very slowly picked myself up, and very weak, because I was very weak when I pulled myself up, and I walked to the couch in the living room. But when I walked in there, both my legs felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds apiece, but I practically had to drag my legs in there. When I finally made it to the couch, I fell into the couch. I didn't sit down slowly. I fell into it because I didn't have the body strength to just lower myself. I just fell right into the couch, laid there until I got my normal body strength back. When my strength came back and I got back on my feet, I walked normally back into the bathroom then to urinate again, because I didn't get a chance to the first time. So there I am standing over the commode trying to urinate the second time, and all of a sudden, boom, there I am on the floor looking up at the ceiling again. Again, couldn't understand how I got down there. Picked myself up at the floor the second time, stumbled back into the couch in the living room the second time, again, very weak, and I laid there until my strength came back. Now the third time I got back on my feet and went to the bathroom to urinate, I was able to do so, and I did not pass out after that. Otherwise, I felt okay after that. Eventually, my wife Carol got up, and while we were eating breakfast, I explained to Carol what happened. I told her that I should go to the hospital and have it checked out. Now, I owned a car at the time, but I didn't want to drive because I was afraid I might pass out while I'm driving, like what happened to me that day. And Carol doesn't drive, so we took a cab to the hospital. And when I was at the hospital, and after explaining to doctors and nurses what happened to me, they had me on a heart monitor. They had me lay down in this bed in the emergency room, and in this room in there, and they put a heart monitor on me. Carol was sitting on a chair at the foot of the bed. The nurses were completely in the other room. But while I was laying there staring up at the ceiling, within a split seconds, I mean as fast as I can snap my fingers, all of a sudden there was the faces of about 6 nurses staring down at me, asking me if I was all right. Two things I didn't understand. I didn't understand how they got there, because I was just staring at a blank ceiling, and all of a sudden there's 6 faces staring at me within a split second. But what happened was I actually had another heart pulse, where my heart stopped beating for a few seconds. And within them few seconds, I was actually unconscious, and I didn't realize it. And the nurses came running in, because Carol said the heart monitor started making these funny noises, and the nurses came running in there. And by the time the nurses got in there and standing over me, looking down at me, a few seconds have went by. My heart started beating again. I came back to consciousness. That's when I saw these 6 faces looking at me. But I didn't realize I had passed out, which means to me it just seemed like a split second went by. I mean, I'm looking at a blank ceiling, and then all of a sudden, as fast as I can snap my fingers, I see 6 faces looking down at me. I did not realize I'd passed out for them few seconds. Otherwise, it just looked like I was looking at the ceiling, and all of a sudden I had these faces looking at me. I had no concept of those few seconds going by, because I had really passed out, and I didn't realize I passed out. Well, okay, now back to the recliner. Well, first of all, let me finish the story. They put a pacemaker in me, and what a pacemaker does, when the heart fails to send those signals to the other part of the heart, the pacemaker will kick in and do it anyway. So when they put a pacemaker in me, that helps regulate my heart rate, and helps my heart beat more regularly than it would if I didn't have a pacemaker. And not only that, since 2009, since they put the pacemaker in me, I have never passed out since. There was a couple times when I fell to my knees on the floor, though. I'll explain that in a minute. But first, let me say that when they put that pacemaker in me in 2009, I went home to the house Carol and I owned. We owned a house, our own house at the time. But when I went home, I there was this vegetable pail that we kept on the floor, and what it really was a disposal for vegetable peelings. Like when I would bend over when I would peel a potato, and the potato peelings would fall into that vegetable pail, would catch the potato peelings. But after I came home from the hospital and I did that, when I'd bend over, I would get really dizzy, which means ever since I had that pacemaker put in 2009, it's very hard for me to bend over, because when I do, if I were to bend over to tie my shoes, for example, otherwise, if I'm walking down the street and I have to tie my shoe, I have to stoop down. I can't just bend over and tie my shoe, or I get dizzy. And that's the way it's been ever since. Now, once Carol and I had to sell that house, or get out of that house, and we went into public housing, where we rented out a half of a house from public housing, but it still had a driveway, and it had a basement that water leaked into it all the time, and I had to carry water out and throw it out, and that became a problem. But anyway, while we lived there, that's once I was walking across the floor, and again I got dizzy and I fell to my knees, and again I had to pull myself up, and I was very weak getting over to the couch, just like when I'd passed out in the or in the bathroom in 2009. Only this time I didn't pass out completely. I just got very dizzy and fell to my knees, and I believe the reason for that is because my pacemaker kicked in and prevented me from passing out. Now, back to those two pains. Now I may be able to explain to you my theory, what I believe those two pains are. Just like at the second house we lived in there, where I fell to my knees on the floor very dizzily, I believe that's happens to me when I lay in the bed, and all of a sudden I start get this pain, and I start getting, nausea, and I start getting where my neurotic is what I'm trying to say, and I believe I'm starting to have another heart pause then, see. And then about 30 seconds later, the second pain comes. I think that's actually my pacemaker shocking my heart, so that my heart starts beating again. Then when my heart starts beating again normally, then all of a sudden I'm not neurotic no more, and all that nausea and all that stuff starts going away, so I start feeling normal again. Now that's my own personal theory, but I will never get the pacemaker people or the doctors to admit that. But that's the only theory I can come up with. Now, as far as sleep in a recliner, since 2009, I've only gotten those pains, and it's always two pains. The first one causes me causes me discomfort, and the second one makes it go away. This has happened to me a few hundred times since 2009, laying in a recliner. However, if I would have been sleeping in the bed all that time, it more likely would have been thousands of times. And that's the difference. Otherwise, when I sleep in a recliner, it doesn't happen as often. Also, when we lived at our house and I fell to my knees, I think it actually happened to me when I was on my feet once. Otherwise, when I start getting neurotic, the first pain I get neurotic, the second pain makes it all go away. See, the thing is, if I were to come to Minnesota, it's hard for me to explain to people there that I must sleep in a recliner, because people are not going to understand that. But people are going to wonder why I can't sleep in the bed. Well, I just explained why in this audio. Another thing is, the last couple of years when I've ever talked about coming to Minnesota, or the subject ever came up, nobody in Minnesota has offered Carol and I a place to stay if we did come, except one person. The only person that's offered us a place to stay if we came to Minnesota is my ex-wife, Marilyn. And ironically, that would work out pretty good, because my daughters are always at Marilyn's house, and I would be seeing my daughters more if we were there. The only thing is I don't really know how Carol would feel staying at my ex-wife's house. And another thing is, I'm not so sure if Marilyn would want me staying there if Carol wasn't there. So if we have a hard time with Carol coming to Minnesota with me, if I were to come to Minnesota by myself, then I don't know if Marilyn really wants me there without Carol. And another one of my sisters already told me I couldn't stay at her place because there's too much commotion going on there at her place with her kids already. And another one of my sisters said I could stay there once, but then when I explained to her the about the recliner and that, now she's not so sure how comfortable I'd be there, because if I was there, even with Carol, I'd have to sleep in a recliner and Carol would have to sleep in a bed. And so it has not been very clear to me exactly where Carol and I would stay if we came to Minnesota, and I just explained to you what my medical reason is. Sometimes I feel more comfortable just staying at home here because I have my recliner here, which I sleep in every night. Carol has her bed in the other room. And also, I'm going to end this audio now, but I just want to say before I do that I'm going to be posting some more links below this audio with doctors explaining to you what heart blocks are, which are actually what heart pauses. And remember that they have first, second, and third degree heart blocks. And first, second, and third degree heart blocks, and I had the third degree. The third degree is the worst. And so anyway, you can read or listen to those or watch those videos and learn more if you're interested. But anyway, I just explained why my medical reasons for not coming to Minnesota this year.